Namaste. This is Ananta Ripa Ajmera, and welcome back to the True to Yourself podcast, a place where we explore the power of authentic living. I am going to talk to you today about 4 stages of being true to yourself. Spiritual awakening is the ultimate goal of our entire human existence, according to all of the world's ancient wisdom traditions. The ancient spiritual science of Vedānta, which is the spiritual philosophy underlying the Yoga and Ayurveda traditions, gives us a really incredible framework of 4 stages to be true to our own higher self. Learn what they are, how I applied them to my own life, and how you can too in the following podcast episode. We are talking about awakening to our true self in this podcast, and this has a huge connotation in terms of both our spiritual evolution as well as our daily well-being on an everyday mundane level of our daily lifestyle choices and our daily food habits. Therefore, I wanted to share with you this incredible framework to be able to make changes at both levels, at the physical, everyday lifestyle level, as well as at the eternal level, at the spiritual level, at the level where we are connected with all living beings. These 4 stages are part of a journey known in Sanskrit as Atma Bodha, which is awakening to the truth of our own self. Atma means self, soul, or the eternal spiritual being that we are. Bodha means to know. Atma Bodha, therefore, means to know our own higher self. Atma Bodha is a spiritual awakening. It is something that we all strive to experience, either consciously or unconsciously in our lives. When we are seeking to know our true self, we will have to make a lot of changes along our way. We will have to make changes at our daily lifestyle level to accommodate and support our spiritual journey. We will also have to make changes at a deeper level in terms of our psychology, our habits, our belief systems, and our very wiring to be able to fill our consciousness and fill our intellect, especially with the light of our true self. When we talk about applying knowledge to our lives, whether that's knowledge for our well-being, which we learn from Ayurveda, or knowledge for our psychological freedom, which we learn from the Yoga Vedānta philosophy, we are talking about winning a victory within our own selves. We are talking about gaining victory over our own negative tendencies that cause us to suffer physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. This inner work that we have to do is our responsibility. It is what allows us and empowers us to evolve and progress spiritually so that we suffer less and less in our daily lives and in our many relationships until one day we are completely free from all the different kinds of bondages we experience of the body and of the mind. This freedom is known in Sanskrit as Jivan Mukti. So the first stage of this spiritual awakening journey is known in Sanskrit as Atma Chintan. Atma Chintan means self-evaluation of negative habits we get stuck in. The word Chintan means reflection. Atma means our soul or our higher self. There are two types of chintan, or two types of reflection that we can engage in. Ordinary, regular chintan is called parachintan, and this is the reflection we tend to do about other people and about outer situations, where we question, why did he not call me, or why did she say that, or why did he do that, or why did she not do that, or why did she not say that, why did this event happen, why did it not happen, why is it cold, why is it hot. We do a lot of this type of reflection. The other type of chintan is known as Atma Chintan. Atma Chintan is the first stage of knowing your true self. Atma Chintan calms down the gossip of the world around us and allows us to instead recognize that, hey, whenever we point our one index finger at another, there are automatically 3 fingers on our hand pointing right back at us. Atma Chintan, therefore, is a reflection and an invitation to really contemplate on our own selves. In this stage of spiritual evolution, we take what we have learned from the knowledge of Ayurveda, Yoga, Vedānta, or any other system that you may be studying that's benefiting you, and we begin to contemplate on where are we personally in terms of what we have learned. In this stage of Atma Chintan, we honestly start to identify gaps between these lofty ideals and great values we learn about in the classroom and, our own reality in a given moment of our lives. This process of Atma Chintan is really about recognizing the holes that we fall into. We really want to see, where is it that we lose our power? We are asked in Atma Chintan to objectively observe the negative habits and patterns that keep us stuck in cycles of worry and fear and anxiety and rage and shame and overeating, under-exercising, sleeping too late, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, that all cause us to suffer at all different levels of our being. We have to identify the holes that we fall in. These holes can be physical, and they can be mental, and they can be emotional. Let's talk about some examples of all of these. At a physical level, we may recognize that we tend to eat foods that we know are really unhealthy for us. For example, we may generally avoid eating pizza because we know that we will probably feel bloated and not so good afterwards. But when our 5 senses encounter pizza through its incredible scent and our tongue starts salivating while we're out somewhere, its sight and smell cause us to fall into a hole of not being able to control our desire to eat the pizza. We may also find that we have patterns of overeating or starving ourselves, or vacillating between starvation and binge eating, as in eating disorders like bulimia. I personally had really struggled with the starvation pattern, and it was my hole that I fell down anytime I felt too overwhelmed by my emotions, and I felt that too many situations in my life were out of control. Perhaps you can relate to that too. Other types of physical holes we could fall into are sleeping or awakening later than we may like to, and we feel that we can't control it. Our eyes can't get off of our phone or off of our screen with the movies that we're watching or whatever correspondence we're catching up on. Ayurveda, the system of health and healing that is the sister science of both yoga and Vedānta philosophy, teaches us that along with food, sleep, and exercise, the five senses are a really important component of our physical health. We want to have balanced senses. What this means is avoiding what is known as ati yoga, or overuse of the senses, ayoga, which is underuse of the senses, or mithya yoga, wrong use of the senses. For your eyes, overstraining them with excessive computer use or phone use would be an example of ati yoga. Sleeping excessively, keeping your eyes closed for a long time, would be underuse of your eyes. And using them to watch inappropriate media like violent movies and pornography would be examples of mithya yoga, or wrong use of the senses, or harmful use, we could say, of the senses. We can do Atma Chintan to just objectively observe what we are touching, tasting, smelling, hearing, and seeing. We can ask ourselves if we're using our senses appropriately, or if there's any area we may want to reduce, increase, or correct how we engage. The sexual sense is another huge area we can observe if we are over-engaging, underusing, or wrongly using. We may over-engage in this, we may suppress our sexuality, or we may use force to try to compel another to have sex against their own will, as an example. These are all examples of ways that we need to look within to see what is it that we are not having a healthy relationship with in terms of our five senses. Excessive attachment to the physical body in any of these or any other ways are considered a body vasana. Vasana is a Sanskrit word that means an obsessive preoccupation in Vedānta. It is one of the three root causes of suffering that prevent us from knowing our true self. We also have mental and emotional holes. If you're like, oh, Ananta, I'm perfect in terms of all my senses, but I just have this fear problem, or my mind won't stop by itself without any inputs, then you are still not free. You're just not in the realm of the body vasanas. You are probably in the realm of loka vasana, or world vasanas in this case. Our material and emotional survival needs are another area we tend to fall into holes. The healthy pursuit of survival is one of 4 life goals in the Vedas, known as artha, which is the pursuit of abundance in all different ways. When out of proportion, however, the desire for survival can also manifest as a vasana, as an excessive preoccupation, which is known in terms of the mind and emotions as world vasana. When we talk about an example of a world vasana hole, it would be working so hard for our material survival that we make ourselves physically and mentally exhausted. And we find ourselves repeatedly burning the midnight oil and simultaneously burning ourselves out. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this. At an emotional survival level, we may also fall into a hole of overextending ourselves beyond what we feel even comfortable with to care for a loved one, only to then have this internal bitterness and resentment as a result when we don't get the appreciation or the strokes or the validation or security we were very, very secretly striving for and wanting for our acts of kindness and caring. We really have to look honestly when we're doing this examination, because it's very, very tempting to get into these kinds of behaviors and not even know that we have them. We believe that we're being good and noble and we're caring and loving others. But if there is an after feeling of resentment, then that care has somewhere some toxicity mixed in with it. And we need to look at that. We need to be able to transform that so that our care and our compassion, which are spiritual emotions to feel, remain pure and can really be of the highest service to the other person, not just there to make ourselves feel good about ourselves because, hey, we were the noble person and we did a great thing. Social media addiction is another possible emotional survival hole where we may spend lots and lots of time and energy trying to just get a little bit of likes and comments and shares and attention from other people. Other common emotional holes we may observe ourselves but not judge ourselves falling into include anger and fear. For example, we may find that we try our best to speak calmly, but when someone says something disrespectful towards us, we lose it and we express our rage by screaming and shouting back, escalating the conflict further. In terms of this scenario, our fear could also cause us to fall in the hole of getting into relationships with people who continually disrespect us. Instead of setting healthy boundaries, or if needed, leaving these types of relationships, we might feel trapped in them out of fear of, oh my gosh, what would happen if I leave? What would everybody think about me? Would they judge me? Would nobody love me? It's an emotional hole. Another emotional hole we may notice we fall into is that of gossiping. Gossiping is always out of a fear of, or a feeling rather, of insecurity to try to make ourselves feel bigger and better by making someone else feel lesser and smaller. We will tear another person down to try to gain the person we're gossiping with's acceptance, even though we know it does not feel good afterwards. We are often so unconscious of our mental and emotional patterns that the first stage of Atma Chintan, developing awareness of where we fall into holes, can bring really, really big discoveries for us. Now, this was a lot to take in. This is a lot to reflect on. This is a huge bunch of really tough questions. While asking them, I would just invite you to bring a compassionate and non-judgmental witnessing consciousness to yourself around this. Sometimes we avoid wanting to confront the truth about ourselves, and that's why we do the parachintan. We just look at the faults of other people, or when we do observe the negative habits and patterns about ourselves that, we don't really like or approve of in ourselves, we may just feel so overwhelmed with self-shaming thoughts that, just keep us further stuck in our own holes. Therefore, the first step of transformation is to gain awareness of where are we unconsciously causing ourselves to suffer. To do this, we really need to employ what is called Sakshi Bhava in Sanskrit. Sakshi Bhava means the presence of a really, really compassionate witness presence that lives within us all. This witnessing capacity is truly a witness in the sense that our true self, our higher self, is not the doer. It is not the experiencer of our actions nor their effects. Its presence is rather one that empowers us to objectively and scientifically, non-judgmentally, simply observe and look at the holes we are presently falling into so that we can then start to pull ourselves out of them. With the spiritual tool and the spiritual practice of Sakshi Bhava, we are able to perform non-guilty, non-self-berating Atma Chintan to discover important insights about our own physical, mental, psychological, and emotional challenges. This first step of transformation empowers us to then begin self-correcting ourselves in the second stage. Stage 2 is Atma Sudhar, self-identifying areas where we can make improvements. Sudhar means correction or improvement in Sanskrit. Atma Sudhar is the second stage of the spiritual awakening journey. In this stage, we do self-evaluation of our negative habits, which naturally leads us to want to institute some changes. In one sense, it may feel as though we are reinventing ourselves. But, folks, given that the actual higher self lives within us all already, no matter what we're doing outside, we are actually only shedding away all that is not our true self in this stage. In the first stage of Atma Chintan, we were observing what kinds of mental, physical, and emotional holes do I fall into. In the Atma Sudhar stage, the second stage, we pick ourselves up by ourselves out of the holes. We need sadhana, dedicated, consistent spiritual practice to pick ourselves up whenever we fall down. After we have contemplated on where we find ourselves regularly getting stuck, we can then self-identify areas we want to start working on improving. At a physical level, this may mean following Ayurveda's seasonal diet and seasonal lifestyle recommendations. I love teaching these as part of my online Wellness Ambassador program. We have a beautiful community also around people who are committed to practicing these recommendations for physical health. And we all encourage each other to really live by them by sharing our own experiences of doing them. It may also mean fighting our tendency to want to sleep in every morning or to stay up late and actually implement the sleep timings we wish to follow. We may decide after engaging in Atma Chintan that we want to ensure that our eyes and ears only hear and see that which is auspicious. If we were watching a lot of violent media or movies or taking in a lot of negativity via the news, and we observed that, oh wow, this was really affecting my mind, then we may decide to look instead at things that are more uplifting, like nature, photographs of different depictions of God from whatever tradition calls to the essence of your being. You may look at animals. I love to look at photos of lions because when I see a lion, I am instantly remembered. I am instantly reminded to be true to my own higher self because I feel that my higher self is a lion for truth. If we observed in Atma Chintan that, hey, we tend to listen to a whole lot of gossip, then this may be the time in Atma Sudhar, the second stage, when we start to either counteract other people's negative statements by saying something positive about the person being gossiped about, change the subject, or leave such conversations altogether. Or we can politely just state our boundaries that, hey, sorry, I really just don't wish to participate in conversations where other people are being brought down. We may also make a commitment to greater self-love in this stage by choosing to do activities that really feed our essence, like spending more time in sacred solitude. So much wisdom comes from silence. In silence, our own rose garden blossoms, according to Rumi, the beautiful Sufi poet. We literally find answers to our own problems in silence. When we sit in silence, when we carve out time and space for silence, our own knowingness has an opportunity to be heard by us. We can also be nourished by listening to spiritual wisdom, by meditating, by writing, by contemplating, by doing artwork. Or we can decide in Atma Sudhar that we really want to take up a committed spiritual practice like speech disciplines to consciously focus on speaking in a way that the Bhagavad Gita recommends we speak in. The Bhagavad Gita says that we want to speak in such a way that is, first of all, without excitement. We don't want to speak from an overwhelming sense of an urge within us for any particular desire or thing that we want. When we bring desires into our speech, we are then basically setting ourselves up for the possibility that they don't get fulfilled. We're not speaking the truth in the sense that will set us free. That's why the Bhagavad Gita says, first of all, the speech without excitement, which is truthful, pleasant, and beneficial, and also the practice of sacred study are the practices for conscious speech. In chapter 17, verse 15, we want to really speak in a way where we're constantly asking ourselves, is what I'm saying coming from an overwhelming urge or desire, first of all? Then, is it truthful? Is it pleasant? Could I say it a little more nicely? And is it beneficial? Which means, is it good for me to say, and is it also good for the other person to hear? We may feel good offloading things from our system, and we can do it very, very melodiously and beautifully, but are we just doing it to benefit ourselves and our ego? Or if we are really being true to our true self, right, our higher self, then anything that we say will also need to be beneficial for the other, because the truth is that my true self and your true self are one and the same. But we have to contemplate that carefully. We may even say something without excitement, which is truthful, pleasant, and beneficial, but it's not something that a person is ready to hear yet. And in that sense, it will not be beneficial to them. So there's a lot of discernment that goes into this practice. And I'll record a whole podcast just around speech because it's such a rich, juicy territory to explore and really, really take up our spiritual speech discipline to another level of self-inquiry. We may also, in the Atma Sudhar stage, seek to cultivate courage by perhaps doing one thing every day that takes us out of our comfort zone, like speaking up in class or at work if we're not used to doing so. That was one of my personal things. I got really, really quiet after I moved to New York City, after going on this really long spiritual journey to know my true self in a really, really deep and dedicated way. I'm still deeply and dedicatedly on a spiritual journey, but it's of a different nature and a different quality at this point. When I was really, really, really deeply working through a lot of holes and getting myself out of them one by one, I found it really beneficial to practice silence as a spiritual practice and a spiritual discipline. I got so deeply into it and I benefited so much from it that I really didn't want to speak. It took me some effort to push myself to actually do so. I realized that being quiet, while it was beneficial to me, it wasn't helping me to fulfill my purpose in terms of sharing then all the wisdom that I did learn through the many years I spent in silence. So for me, I made that my intention that, okay, every meeting that we have, I will just push myself to at least say one thing just to be in that habit of sharing, because I know that this stage that I'm in of my life now is calling for that. That is what I feel I need to do, what I ought to do, what I do to express my gratitude. This podcast came as a direct result of my also pushing myself into the mode of free flowing, fearlessly authentic expression. So here we are, and thank you for listening. Stage 3, Atma Nirman, constructing ourselves into who we want to be. This gets really exciting. Nirman means to create. The third stage of Atma Bodha, knowing our true self and being true to that self, is called Atma Nirman, where we can build ourselves into who we want to be. We start to recognize at this stage that, oh my gosh, this world is full of slippery, slimy holes of illusory reality known as Maya that gets strengthened by our own likes and dislikes, attachments and aversions. When we like something, we build an illusion of how great it is, especially if it's something outside of our own selves. We believe that that is the key to fulfillment, happiness, peace, success, and tranquility. We dig ourselves into a hole, and then we have to start over again. But here at this stage, we actually, through having evaluated in Atma Chintan and then acted upon our spiritual practice of self-improvement of our negative habits in Atma Sudhar, get to experience how much power we actually have to change. And in this stage, we consciously sidestep the holes. Once we make a practice of self-improvement a regular part of our waking everyday reality, we then reach a beautiful stage where we are able to see the holes of our own shortcomings and our own forgetfulness of our true self and the places where we have not been true to ourselves, and we consciously sidestep those holes. We now experience a positive, synergistic, creative writing of our own life's script. At this stage, when we receive an invitation to lash out in anger, for example, at something that would have really threw us off the edge before, we may be able to now recognize that, hey, I'm getting provoked by someone else's disrespectful statement, and then discern in the moment what is the best response versus reaction. We will not start cursing in a knee-jerk manner this time. We may actually pause for a moment to think, is it best to simply disengage? Could I set a boundary and then perhaps respond effectively without being under the grip of my overactive mind and emotions that are triggered probably by something in my past? A freedom emerges to start to create a brand new reality, moment by moment, thought by thought, word by word, and action by action. We can have more and more positive encounters with others, and even surprise ourselves and others in the process. So now I want to share with you, now that I've revealed the first 3 stages, my own journey with applying them personally to pull myself out of the black hole of shame. I recognized how problematic this emotion was many years ago and how it prevented me from taking self-corrective measures in whatever area I felt bad about myself in, whether that was not being able to do something that someone else wanted me to do, or for not meeting other people's standards and expectations for me. Once I could see this, I made a resolved intention, and I'll talk to you all about that probably in its own episode as well, because that's a really awesome thing in itself, to befriend my shame. Yes, I had to befriend my shame. With Atma Sudhar, I started to really offer this shame that I felt tremendous love and compassion, and consciously reoriented my own mind to see how I could take every situation that came my way as an opportunity to learn, grow, and evolve spiritually instead of falling into the hole of shame. I began symbolically practicing letting go of shame when I did a spiritual practice called Sandhya Vandanam, which I teach in the Wellness Ambassador program, and which has really, really deeply transformed so many aspects of my life. Sandhya Vandanam is an ancient spiritual ritual that allows us to let go of what are called karmic sins. Sin in the Vedic spiritual tradition is simply any time we forget our true self and we get identified with the changing mind and the changing body. Sin can also be thought of as that mental agitation that informs us through our conscious whether an action was correct or not correct. If we have no reaction, then it is said not to be a sin. But when we ourselves have a reaction to something that we did and we keep replaying it over and over again and we keep on questioning ourselves about it, then it is known to be a sin. We are not having original sin. Our original self is actually Atma. Our original self is pure soul. And therefore, we have to constantly remember and let go of all those times when we forgot. Sandhya Vandanam, through the medium of the water, gives us an opportunity to place a little bit of water in our hand and consciously identify what we want to let go of. So I would pour a little water in my hand and I would say, I am practicing letting go of shame. And I would do it 3 times. You can either let go of 3 things in the previous 24-hour cycle that you no longer want to carry, or you can just let go of the same thing over and over again. I did this a lot for the 1 year I really focused on letting go of shame. When I would recognize that I forgot who I am, I would start to remind myself over and over again, because it's long and it's slow and it is a process, that I am a powerful being, like the sun, like Atman. At first, it was hard to believe. Like, really? Okay, I'm saying this, but do I really believe it? I'm not so sure. But as I kept repeating it over and over and over and over and over again, because spiritual practice is a practice, not a perfect, my memory of myself as a powerful being, possessing the power of 1,000 radiant suns, grew slowly and deeply. This spiritual practice cleaned away many layers of my ignorance in the form of shame, so that I could come closer to reflecting the pure light of knowledge of who I really am, the all-powerful, shameless, taintless, stainless self. In the 3rd stage of Atma Nirman, I noticed I would go a really long time then without experiencing the then usual emotion of shame in my being. Then Out of the blue, an invitation to feel ashamed would surface, triggered by some kind of external situation. But this time, with the regularity of my spiritual practice, I could start to see the invitation for what it was. An invitation, which I could choose to accept or decline. I started sidestepping the whole of shame with the knowledge of my true self that started settling deeper and deeper into my being with the conscious practice of remembering who I am as a soul more often than I forgot. Stage 4 is known as Atma Vikas, continued self-evolution and giving back. Once we experience such breakthroughs in our ability to sidestep the holes in our lives, everything starts changing, and we are then ready to truly engage in what is known as seva, or selfless service, to express our tremendous gratitude for what we have gained within our own selves. We really become givers in a true sense in the third Atma Vikas stage. We become more whole versus falling into holes here. At this journey of Atma Bodha, at this stage of the journey of Atma Bodha, it is not a matter of 10 steps leading you to health. Rather, it is actually about one step leading to infinite steps, because each step is a complete achievement unto itself. And you go not just from ill health to health or ignorance to greater self-knowledge, but you actually have a real paradigm shift. I truly experienced this in terms of my process of letting go of shame. This one deep resolved intention translated into an opening of so many other doorways into knowing and really being true to my own higher self. It's helped me to start lessening the judgments I held about myself and then about other people as an extension of that. It started to free my heart of anger and fear. I could see how important this resolution to let go of shame was for me, and how it was so interconnected with so many other negative emotions I experienced. I just focused on this one thing, shame, but it unlocked so many other things, and it freed me of so many other negative emotions and behavior patterns. Committing to making just this one emotional shift really started to shift my whole consciousness. It deepened my journey and freed me to follow my higher calling when tempting situations would arise, because I became less and less willing to go along with what other people wanted from me out of shame of saying no or going my own way. I began to then set my own standards for how I wanted to live my life and to really be true to myself and live in accordance with Dharma, actions that bring about goodness for the maximum number of people as possible, and moksha, spiritual freedom. I gained so much power from letting go of shame that I now recognize more clearly than ever before how much of my energy and light were previously sucked into shame. I now feel I am able to write my own life script and experience a baseline of independent joy and contentment, even amidst the inevitable ups and downs of daily life. In the Atma Vikas stage, we move from having an existence where we are animal-like, sense-pleasure-driven people, constantly desiring and needing gratification at the body level or at the mind level, or even at the intellectual level, to having a human existence where we can think and plan intelligently to be able to live our lives in a beneficial way, to then even going beyond that and having a more divine existence where we become givers in a true sense. In Atma Vikas, we keep rethinking our internal thought paradigms from limiting thoughts, from self-defeating, self-sabotaging thoughts, to more expansive, freedom-giving thoughts. We make an inner movement from feeling as if we have to constantly fight battles inside our own minds, as well as with others, to naturally being able to manifest real harmony in our lives. If not immediately, then definitely eventually. Atma Vikas puts us in an upward bound direction in our evolution of consciousness. So we keep experiencing continual internal growth. This progression through the 4 stages of Atma Bodha, the journey of being true to our higher self, clears up our ignorance in specific areas we self-identify and hones our ability to further analyze our habits of thoughts and actions that take us away from our true self. The more often we identify the areas of our lives where we lose our power and then practice regaining that power through the 4 stages of Atma Bodha, the easier it becomes for us to face and eventually overcome our layers of ignorance. With sustained practice of self-observation and self-evaluation, we are able to see the ever subtler and subtler areas where we get stuck in ignorance. As the consciousness of Atma Vikas illumines more and more corners of our lives, we can identify ignorance and purify our minds and bodies more efficiently with each iteration. When we uplift ourselves in one place, it becomes easier to uplift ourselves in other areas as well. Over time, Atma Vikas, the 4th stage, eventually gives way to full-fledged Atma Bodha, knowing our true self and being true to our higher self, wherein we live with the complete freedom of self-knowledge. It all begins with an inner decision to turn inside, to listen, receive, and reflect. I personally find it incredibly inspiring to know that once we resolve to take this journey, we have with us a tried and tested path that will, over time, again and again, lead us back home to our own higher self. Thank you so much for joining me for this 3rd episode of the True to Yourself podcast. I invite you to join me online for a one-on-one session to explore your own areas where you would like to apply this process of Atma Bodha to any area of your life you wish to make changes in. I offer one-on-one counseling in terms of wellness at the physical level with Ayurveda, diet, and lifestyle. I also offer spiritual counseling, which gives you an opportunity to identify some emotional patterns and areas in your life where you want to make changes. And I would be delighted to support you as you apply this time-tested framework to really come out of any hole that you find yourself continually falling into. I teach you in these sessions practices like the Sandhya Vandanam water ritual that I briefly mentioned in this podcast, and so many other practices that have been really transformational for me on my journey. I also invite you warmly to join my Wellness Ambassador program as part of my organization, The Ancient Way. We have a really beautiful community of spiritual seekers from all different countries around the world who meet every Saturday on Zoom to learn about the beautiful sunlit art and science of Ayurveda, which empowers us to live in harmony with the rhythms of Mother Nature. Ayurveda and its sister science of yoga help us to purify our bodies and minds so that we can come closer to our soul and be true to our higher self in all activities and engagements and interactions of our embodied existence. This is the highest purpose of both Ayurveda and yoga, and I am taking you through how to really live and apply these sciences in your own life through the Wellness Ambassador program. For the pandemic and all of the financial considerations that are involved with the international pandemic that we've had, we've made this program a pay from the heart model, so you can contribute whatever you are able to on a monthly basis and be part of an incredible community that is meeting once a week online. We also have a community buddy system where I assign you to another member of the community, so you have someone to talk to about your process of making changes in your life and where you're at in terms of recognizing the holes, making changes, sidestepping the holes, and, then really coming out of them and not falling back into them. It's an amazing opportunity to have that support to be able to make sustainable changes in terms of your well-being. And we also have a very, very thriving and beautiful community WhatsApp forum where members of the program are always sending encouraging messages about their application of the teachings with photographs and videos, and everybody just supports one another and cheers one another along for seemingly mundane things like, well, I woke up early today. It may seem like a small thing in the grand scheme of the world, but these little victories that we have are so important, and we all need to have an amazing space where we can share about them and receive encouragement for them so that we keep reinforcing the positive in our lives. Our program really is full of so many positive people and seekers, and we have a really wonderful space, and I like to think of it as a garden for you to come into and benefit from all that these ancient sciences have to offer for us for well-being at all levels of our existence. We will also be soon creating and launching a Circle of Life membership program where you can join the community and benefit from weekly classes, guest speakers, community circles, recipes, spiritual teachings, and so much more, which will be starting up in October. This will also be a wonderful way to just check out the community and, experience some of it and see if you want to stay engaged in that way to begin with, and then perhaps explore one of the deeper training programs, one of the year-long Wellness Ambassador programs. We'll be offering the year one, which is about healing the physical body, starting up again in February of 2022, and simultaneously we'll be offering a year of really, really deep emotional and psychological exploration through yoga philosophy and the psychology that informs Ayurveda and yoga, as well as going through the Chakra system, which I'm writing about as part of my second book that is going to come out in just a little over a year from now. If you're interested in meeting with me one-on-one, you can visit the-well.com/Ayurveda. I am so happy and honored to serve as the director of Ayurveda at The Well in New York City. I also offer online sessions. And then if you want to join me for the Wellness Ambassador program, you can visit theancientway.co/wellness ambassador. We will soon have some more information up on the Ancient Way website about our community Circle of Life program as well. Thank you so much once again for joining me, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Namaste.